Hello. I don't know if anybody is in here right now, but um we're here. Um we'll wait for people to file in here. Started live a little bit earlier than 8:30, but how we doing? Okay, so we have a few people in here. Currently what I have up is the satellite loop of all of the United States. Um I don't want to launch Epic Games right now. I'm gonna launch Epic Pen. There we go. But currently what I have up is a satellite loop of all of the United States. So currently we can see that we have a lot of thunderstorm activity from areas in Montana, Washington, and over in the Rocky Mountains, all the way over into the Southern Plains region, and then back up through Texas and the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic. So it's a pretty eventful evening and afternoon over portions of the United States. So far today, there has been significant hail over Kansas and a lot of wind reports and even a significant wind report over the Mid-Atlantic. As we can see here, the risk for today is a marginal currently now and dropped. Oh shoot, Gab's in here. Okay. Um, and so that's a risk for today. Tomorrow there is a dual slight risk. We have one in North Dakota and South Dakota, and we have one from South Carolina into New Jersey in the Mid-Atlantic. Tornado-wise, there's a 2% tornado risk for the slight risk in the Dakotas, and then there's a 15 wind in both of the slights, and then there's a 15 hatched hail in the Dakotas. And then day 3, there is a large marginal from the northeast into the southeast and going through the Mid-Atlantic, and then there's another severe region from the southern plains up into the Midwest toward the Illinois-Iowa border with a slight from in the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and then there's another one in North Dakota and Minnesota. And then there's nothing out for day 4 through 8 yet. But day 4 through 8 definitely has some interesting days to talk about. As we can see right now, there are some watches and warnings up. I gotta get them up on the map. I don't know why, it just bugged me out. But currently, there's severe watches in Connecticut and in some of the eastern United States areas, and there's several severe warnings, including in areas in Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Nothing tornado warned right now, but certainly a good amount of severe storms over those areas. Awesome. Um, so that's kind of the rundown for that. Kind of the future outlook on how some of the storms in the southern plains are expected to kind of evolve. They're expected to kind of stay there, especially in the panhandle of Texas. Probably still be strong to severe into the evening, and and then tomorrow over the southern plains, more of just some pop-up storms. The mid-Atlantic, over the next like 24 hours, this is going to be kind of looks like those storms kind of die off here pretty soon. And then into tomorrow, storms fire up around 3 o'clock Eastern time in West Virginia and along the Appalachian Mountains in the Carolinas, and they move eastward with scattered wind gusts being a possibility. And then we see them kind of move off into the Atlantic coast by around 9 or so, and they kind of move eastward. Across the plains tomorrow, let's look at that. And we'll go a little bit more in depth, but we're kind of giving a little bit of an overview right now. It looks like storms are going to fire up around 2 p.m. Mountain Time in South Dakota, 3 p.m. Central, and they kind of move into Nebraska as well, and we see a couple kind of clusters form over there. Kind of looking at some more in-depth kind of ingredients and products for tomorrow over the Central Plains. We can see at 500 millibars. If we zoom out a little bit, give us a better picture. But there's a high pressure over the Four Corners region here. There is a pretty strong trough over here in the eastern United States that is bringing that severe weather threat over Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, and into the mid-Atlantic. And then we have several short waves that are riding the peripheral of this ridge over the western United States and then back into the Central Plains. This high pressure is eventually going to break down a little bit in the ridge and move a little bit to the eastward, shifting your severe weather risk for Thursday and Friday areas further to the east more in here. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But pretty complex pattern here. This wave that is showing up in California and Nevada, this is going to be the wave that will move into the like Nebraska area and kind of South Dakota for Thursday's severe weather threat. So that's kind of the wave to watch for that. Now I'm going a little bit more in depth on the Mid-Atlantic risk for tomorrow. We can see that instability values in the region. This is the HRRR, so they might be underdone a little bit, but even the HRRR has 2,000 to 3,000 joules per kilogram, which is pretty strong amounts of energy over that region. And then we can see the scattered thunderstorm coverage. Vikings here. What's up, Viking? We can see here, this is a forecast sounding. Some of you might not understand what this means, but over here in this section, this is like your temperature dew point information here, and then this is all your wind shear information right here. So we kind of want to ignore some of this stuff down here. It really isn't very useful. And so ignoring that stuff, and I'll first kind of talk about the thermodynamic profile or temperature dew point profile. So green is the dew point right here, and red's the temperature, and these are all plotted on a graph on a skew chart. And you can see here between the red and the white line here, this is your parcel line. So between this line, the red and the white line, that's where your instability lies. So a pretty thick instability column here. So lots of fuel for thunderstorms to go off of in the mid-Atlantic, and that's leading to strong acceleration throughout the profile with lapse rates of 9, and lapse rates are a measure of the temperature decreasing with height. And also leading to CAPE of 3,000 joules per kilogram in the mixed layer, 4,000 at the surface. The hodograph will not favor tornado protection because of the size of it being so small, but it is still, there's still enough shear, deep layer shear 17 knots to give you a damaging wind threat over the mid-Atlantic. And you can see there's a deep layer shear parameter even in pivotal, and you can see, or 6 kilometer, and you can see there's 20 to 30 knots. On the further north you go, the more there is. So that's not terrible. That'll definitely be enough to bring a severe threat over for those regions. Dang, Peter's here. We got a lot of people. Anything for the Chicago area? We'll talk about Chicago later on, and kind of the risk for that area later on. But yeah. So we'll kind of move back into talking about the Mid-Atlantic. Thank you guys for all being in here. What's up, Peter? Sam? I'm just saying, Sam, we're going to talk about the severe risk over the Midwest and that area once I get to Friday. I'm not even to Friday. I'm talking about Wednesday right now. So Wednesday's nowhere close to Illinois. But going into the northern plains on Wednesday, we can see that there is a decent amount of wind shear in the deep layer, especially going into Nebraska, 30 to 40 knots of shear there. Decent amount of instability as well. Actually, not a decent amount, a lot of instability. There's 2,000 to even almost 5,000 joules per kilogram in mixed layer CAPE. which is a ton of energy for storms to use up. And we can see that storms generally start to pop off toward the afternoon and evening hours. Um, Here's a forecast sounding over South Dakota, and we can see that there is a ton of low-level dry air and very steep lapse rates along with that. Some instability. This will provide mainly a damaging wind threat because this air is sinking downward and it's going to need somewhere to go, and it's just going to expand with time. And with all that dry air there, you're just going to get a lot of downbursts and wind gusts with that. Now, once these storms get further to the east, where there's this higher area of instability, and stronger moisture, there probably will be maybe more of a tornado and hail risk, but it's not going to be the highest. We can see, taking a sounding in North Dakota, there's a decent amount of curvature with this photograph, which will yield a tornado threat. But there is a lot of warm air once you get towards 700 to 800 millibars, which may suppress thunderstorm development and also cause it harder for storms to establish mesocyclones, which would or surface-based mesocyclones, which would decrease the tornado risk as well. So we'll have to watch that. Um, but we can see Nebraska probably starts to get going toward dark. Taking forecast soundings in Nebraska, we can see again we have that surface, we have that temperature inversion here at 800 millibars. That's rather strong in Nebraska, and so there's a potential that storms may be lying above that and using the instability um, above that, above 3 kilometers, and above that there's a good amount of instability and moderate amount of CAPE being 2,000 joules per kilogram plus, and a lot of wind shear as well, 30 knots deep layer, 70 at 8 kilometers. So these storms are going to be using a lot of wind shear and instability if they're not surface rooted. So there's going to be a hail and wind threat with those, probably not a tornado risk though. And we can see here going out to that period, we can use the helicity tracks here. And this will kind of tell us our updraft strength once this loads. And we can see there's a lot of strong updrafts that kind of develop over North Dakota and the South Dakota area and also into Nebraska. So there's going to be a threat of widely scattered severe storms over the plains tomorrow. Cyclones like Iowa State, yeah. So I'm getting questions about Chicago area. So we'll look at Chicago area for Friday. Currently, I do think that Chicago might be a little bit too far to the east for Friday now, with based on how the models are trending, unless the GFS solution pans out, which is a good thing for you. We can see most of the action will probably be into Iowa. Maybe overnight something would happen into Illinois, but as we see overnight, um, the instability profiles get a lot more capped, and there isn't as much instability over to the east in kind of the Chicago area. And you might also deal with the lake breeze boundary. So right now, it seems like the severe risk over kind of northeastern Illinois may not be too high. We'll have to monitor that over the next few days because it's going to change with how dynamic that system is. But I'll briefly touch on that since there's somebody in the chat asking about that. Now we're kind of waiting for the HRRR to load in for Thursday, but we can check the 18Z NAM out for Thursday. And also the NAM out for tomorrow as well. But Thursday on the NAM, we can see scattered severe storms fire up over Kansas, Colorado, and Nebraska, and move eastward, also into the Dakotas as well. And we can see that there is, once this loads, everything's taking a little bit to load today. There's a lot of instability out there, though. CAPE values of 2,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram, which is a lot of juice and energy for storms to use. Dew points are into the 70s or upper 60s in most spots, so lots of moisture for thunderstorms to again use up and help create them to be pretty powerful. Looks like this threat over Kansas, Nebraska, or especially Kansas, dies off toward 8 o'clock. Nebraska's threat kind of stays longer than midnight. And then looking up into kind of the Dakotas for Thursday, it looks like storms form around 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that kind of move southeastward with time and strengthen, and then gradually weaken as we get toward 1 a.m. So that's kind of your timeline of events. Hazards for Wednesday, or not Wednesday, Thursday. Let's go back over here. Hazards for Thursday. Maybe a tornado risk over areas in Nebraska. It's going to depend on cloud cover and the temperature and dew point spreads. But there is a rather solid looking hodograph for thank you, Gav. Thanks for stopping by too. But there's a rather solid hodograph for tornado production. Storm chasers are going to love Thursday. There's definitely going to be some great structure opportunities. But this sounding more supports hail, and that's because the temperature dew point spread is 28 degrees, and having a temperature dew point spread being 28 degrees makes it harder for thunderstorms cloud bases to be lower to the ground. You can see here the cloud bases would be 2,000 meters up, which is very high. You can still get tornadoes out of that, but it's a lot harder. Large hail would probably be the dominant mode, though. Your hodograph is rather long, and it's also pretty straight once you get past around 3 kilometers, which is a lot of what hail loves. Hail also loves drier air toward the surface and also in the middle levels. And hail loves a lot of cape between these blue lines right here, which is what meteorologists and weather enthusiasts call the hail growth zone. And you can see there's a lot of fuel within that zone. So you can get some pretty big hailstones Thursday. I wouldn't be shocked if a hatched hail risk is introduced once we get closer to Thursday. Yeah, that's something to watch over the Dakotas and Nebraska. I see there's a bunch of people in here, so if people have questions, doesn't matter what day, just file them through. I don't really have too much of a structure, so if you have questions, just let me know and I'll answer them. So I have 2 monitors so I can see the chat at the same time that I'm talking to everybody and looking at the weather graphics that I use. Anyway, you can see by the end of this run, this is going to be the player for Friday's system over the Midwest in Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, maybe back in Nebraska as well. But you can see that system is kind of starting to charge up over that region and move eastward with time. So you can see that kind of happen with time. And the NAM's evolution is really cool. Like if you loop the NAM, you can see that happen with time. So we can play the NAM on the loop and you can kind of see that. You can kind of see everything kind of happening. It's taking a minute to load, so apologize for that. But see the ridge break down a little. It's kind of right along it, which is a very typical summer pattern. Is you get a ridge to break down a little bit, and then you have systems that slide across it, and then you have that consistent flow over the eastern United States as well. You can see as that ridge moves a little bit further to the southwest and breaks down, you can see our flow becomes more zonal or west to east. And we see that MCV and convectively enhanced shortwave kind of move into the Midwest, and that'll provide a severe risk for Friday over areas in Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, kind of that area. There's where we're watching Friday right now. Now, Friday's evolution is very uncertain because MCVs or mesoscale convective systems are notoriously hard to forecast and pin down. How mesoscale convective vortexes form is, as you can see here, with that line of storms. I didn't mean to puck a forecast sounding, but with this line of storms that develops over Nebraska, models are outputting an MCV with this or localized area of low pressure on the back end of it. Now, where this is even going to be placed is super uncertain, and the timing and everything is also uncertain. So it just causes really funky evolutions with the models and a lot of run-to-run variance or change. This is the GFS, and this is for Saturday at 7 o'clock. Pretty crazy. Yeah, indeed, TG. It is pretty crazy, but we can see a model trend. We can make a little GIF and a model trend GIF, and we can see that there's a lot of change throughout this. You can see the idea is down that there's going to be some sort of severe weather event Friday. It's just where, how significant, and also the timing and overall details are really uncertain because, again, these systems really are finicky and change a lot with time. So we can see right now it's trending a little bit further to the west. So areas in Illinois might not have as high of a risk as they did maybe a day ago, but it could trend back east all of a sudden as well. And then we could start to see that risk shift further to the east and cause a higher severe risk over there. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But subtle changes within the system is going to be a big deal, which is why it's going to be pretty hard to forecast. Um, see here. Any other? See, any other people in chat right now? Doesn't seem like it, so we're kind of W background. What background did you see? Chicago never get weather. You like this background though? Yeah, thank you. Chicago never get weather this year. Okay, be quiet. Everywhere in the state gets a lot of stuff, so you can't really complain. So here's a look at 500. Once we get out to the national perspective here of the whole country. Most of the rain seemed to go to my south today. That's cool. I got hit by a ton of rain. There's probably a couple inches of rain that fell where I am. Had a nice shelf too, which I posted on the channel. So if people want to check that upload out after the stream, go ahead. I'm gonna close some tabs that I don't think I'm gonna need anymore, like satellite. Okay, so here's the HRRR for Thursday. So we can see there's a pretty strong wave that is over Colorado and Nebraska on the HRRR. For Friday, I mean, not really, because Friday, the highest area is going to be very uncertain and it's going to change from model to model. I mean, there's a very broad zone. You're not going to get slabbed Friday. I'll tell you that. Typically, tornadoes from MCVs are generally not as strong. I mean, are generally not like super long lived and not like super life threatening. We've had strong tornadoes from those systems before, but it's not something to be overly scared about, especially being further east as well, in the Chicago area. I'm assuming, um, typically overnight as well. I mean, MCV tornadoes aren't just spin ups aren't all just spin-ups. Like you can have longer lived tornadoes from them, but a setup like Friday is probably going to lead to shorter lived tornadoes, maybe stronger tornadoes, but probably not over the Chicago area right now. As you can see at 850, there's not as much low level wind support as you get into northeastern Illinois. It's mainly more maximized over kind of Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota. So if there is a higher tornado corridor, it's probably in here somewhere on Friday for now. This will definitely change as we get closer to Friday, but that's kind of what I'm thinking for now. Is it cutting in and out really bad? Okay. Is that better or what? I'll talk about Thursday though. As we can see, the HRRR did fully load out for Thursday. I don't know about College of DuPage yet, but we can see there's a decent amount of low flow over Nebraska. So it seems like Nebraska is going to be the area to watch for maybe a tornado risk on Thursday. Excuse my cough. But it looks like the HRRR fire supercells over that region in the evening, and they kind of are pretty stationary. Decent environment. Dew point temperature spreads are very low. Generally a decent amount of 3 Cape. A small hodograph, but it does turn. So there's definitely going to be some sort of tornado risk with smaller supercells on Thursday if this solution were to be correct. Large hail, wind gusts as well once we get kind of more of that Boeing segment type deal, which I'm going to guess the HRRR eventually shows. Yeah, it shows one in the Dakotas. Ahead of that segment in the Dakotas, we'll see if the environment favors wind gusts. It probably will. And yeah, it does. There's a lot of stable air, but you have a lot of dry air toward the surface. Again, steep lapse rates or temperature change in height, and decent deep layer shear, 20-30 knots. So you're going to have enough wind shear to support a damaging wind risk with that, along with the thermodynamic environment with all that dry air. Looks like there's some sort of MCV over the Midwest or some sort of system. I'll take a look at that. 700 millibars. So I don't know if that's an MCV, but there is some sort of system that the HRRR is picking up over Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe a little bit into Illinois there that we'll have to watch a little bit for Thursday, but probably more of an Iowa thing. Yeah. So it looks like there might be a chance for a strong storm or two in Iowa Thursday. You have that remnant boundary, which is setting up over the region, which is leading to more backed surface winds and curved low-level photographs. So there might be a threat of a tornado in Iowa on Thursday, a rogue supercell or two, producing a tornado, large hail, and damaging winds. Yeah, it's pretty mid. It's not like the highest threat ever. You can see that boundary is pretty well stated on the HRRR. You can kind of see it goes back into Illinois as well. And then the more prominent threat over Nebraska with the higher dew points. HRRR is for sure over mixing this though. So the dew points are probably going to be in the low 70s widespread, not upper 60s or mid 60s, but that's just typical. Nebraska though probably has the dew points pretty close to reality. And we can see that nice 700 wave over there in Nebraska with the low pressure system kind of sitting there. So there's definitely going to be a heightened risk for severe storms in Nebraska on Thursday night. Click. I mean, I've done that before. I just personally like being able to do single image, but forecast loop isn't bad either. Just takes a little bit to load when I have all my streaming equipment running. See, it's taking forever to load. I've done it before. You can see the evolution that little storm in Iowa with the HRRR has kind of rise that boundary southward, which is interesting. It's a cool solution. Be a nice little radar loop, and then you can see all those storms in Nebraska that form. Pretty widespread area of supercells that develop in Nebraska. See about ahead of them. Yeah, so this would definitely be a forecast setting that would support tornadoes with surface-based storms, but the problem is getting a surface-based storm with an inversion like that at 700 to 850 millibars. But you have a very curved hydrograph, so there definitely will be a tornado risk, probably from the SPC day of. Probably have a 5 tour over like north central Nebraska if this solution stays, which they HRRR's had it just further southwest by about 50 miles or so. Other models are also starting to load in now. So you have the ZRZ NAM loading in, and then you have the ZRZ FV3, and then we have the HW. The rest of the WRFs are about to start loading in as well, so that's going to be interesting. I guess we can look into maybe the longer range while we're waiting for other models to load, and we can talk about Saturday. So we'll look at the GFS and the Euro for Saturday. So for Saturday, the GFS and Euro differ a decent amount on placement. The GFS has a stronger trough over southern Ontario than the Euro. Euro has a more broad look. GFS has a little bit of a more tight and focused trough over the region on Saturday. And if you look at the dew points, we can see the GFS, of course, is going to be faster with that front, having the front being all the way in Iowa, Wisconsin already, and Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin. And then the Euro, which I'm going to mark in blue, has the front a lot further to the west, all the way back in Iowa, with a secondary little surface trough feature that's out over in the Midwest. Generally, low-level support on Saturday is not going to be super high over any of the area. You can see the main low-level cyclone, at least on the GFS, is all the way up in Canada right here. So maybe you get your highest tornado threat is gonna be up in Canada. There will definitely be a threat for damaging winds kind of circled all the way back into the Midwest states and maybe further south than that, but not expecting anything robust with that. And then the Euro has, of course, that more broad, low-level look. Whoever subbed, thank you for doing that. It is a very loud notification on my screen, which just scared the crap out of me. But you can see the Euro has a little bit more of that broad look, but it also is further south. Maybe a tornado risk in Michigan. We can pick a sounding there and kind of look. Not really. You have really jaded surface winds, which is not going to cause a tornado risk. Into the long range, though, things are definitely going to be interesting. Sunday, probably not going to have too much severe storms Sunday. Maybe a severe weather risk over the Missouri Valley in like Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, somewhere in there. You do have once this loads, you do have some northwest flow that impinges on the region on the Euro with a weak shortwave. But the main stuff is over in Canada, which is going to move southeastward for the next day, Monday, and provide a severe risk further to the southeast. You can see Monday on the Euro, you can start to see this zonal pattern start to set up with several different waves over the Rocky Mountains that are going to traverse east, the northern plains, back into the Midwest, and probably into the Northeast as well. So we'll kind of get into one of those patterns where we have line segments each day that kind of move through, and then your occasional MCV as well. GFS has a similar look to the Euro. Sunday it has some sort of severe risk over kind of Ohio region, maybe if there's any support under that 500 trough. Yeah, but the main show or the main stuff's going to kind of start setting up on Monday as we get deeper moisture to come in from the Gulf and relatively strong trough that starts to move in with that more northwesterly flow over the upper Midwest and meeting the deeper moisture as well. I'm looking at 850. We have a really broad kind of southerly, southwesterly flow that kind of brings that deeper moisture up from the Gulf into the upper Midwest. 700 millibar, you get a few more robust waves to kind of ride the ridge, which is over kind of the southern United States now. And we can see that thunderstorms do end up developing on the GFS at 7 p.m. Over kind of Iowa, Minnesota, if this solution were to be correct. Looking over at ensembles, you can see that the GFS ensemble has really deep moisture still over in this upper Midwest region. 500, you can still see we have a lot of modest flow from kind of North Dakota, South Dakota, back into the Wisconsin region in here. Much rain for Texas. Texas over the next few days, I'll just look quickly. GFS has a couple inches of rain maybe over south central Texas, and then maybe the Panhandle getting some rain over the next few days through Wednesday or Monday. So just a small update there. And then yeah, we can generally see that the severe risk though on when Monday's going to be probably the Dakotas back into kind of Wisconsin. You can see there's a little bit of a frontal boundary that's also placed over the region, and we have that cold front that's kind of generally sitting here. Dry line that's set up over the Rockies, and then we have that deeper moisture that's over the Midwest region, leading to rather strong instability profiles. You can pick a little area of sounding ahead of those thunderstorm clusters that are developing, and you can see that there is a ton of moisture and very strong instability that is projected by the GFS with 4,000 mixed layer CAPE and measure the fuel. So lots of storm fuel for any storm to tap into on Monday. Tornado threat is unknown at this time, but there's definitely going to be a threat for wind gusts and hail. Then we can see Tuesday, we still have deep moisture over the Midwest and also over into the Central Plains with a trailing frontal system that's kind of placed in here, rather with a stalled boundary. So there's definitely going to be severe threats throughout the week, next week, looking into the middle levels of the atmosphere. We can see that there's a few weaker waves that kind of are along the frontal system, one in Iowa and Minnesota here, one in Iowa, or not Iowa, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and then we have another one over Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri. So we're going to have several different areas to watch on Tuesday as well. Probably the more robust region is going to be over the lower Missouri River Valley. So we'll have to watch that region. And then going into Wednesday, stuff's going to be a little bit more uncertain at this point, but the GFS has a picture where you'd have that same frontal system move southward a little bit more into the Midwest and the lower Great Lakes. So you'd have an isolated severe risk, maybe a little bit more with that. I'm looking at the ensembles again for that day, or for Tuesday. We can see a similar look to what the deterministic model had. Westernly surface flow with strong deep moisture from the central plains back into the Midwest and lower Great Lakes region. And then for Wednesday, the same look as that frontal boundary kind of stalls, and you start to see these systems that move along the peripheral of these two high pressure areas, one in the Four Corners region and one over the southern and lower Mississippi River Valley region. So it's going to be a stormy pattern for those that are in the northern plains, upper Rockies, into kind of the mid-Atlantic and northeast region over the next week or so. So that's kind of our pattern coming up here. The Euro shows the same general idea as well. Looking into Tuesday, we can see possible derecho. So for that, I wouldn't be surprised if we get one out of this pattern. It's just going to be a matter of where and what day. I mean, you could. There's definitely going to be days with higher tornado risk. It's just going to be again where and when and how high. I wouldn't say like super high, but there's going to be a couple days in this period where you're going to have a more robust tornado risk. Wondering what high temperatures are going to be in Illinois on Friday. Okay, we can give you a little bit of an idea of what they might be here. So, Friday. Looks like not going to be super hot. Chicago's probably going to be the warmest. Actually, St. Louis area is probably going to be the warmest here. So looking like most of the state's going to be in the 80s, maybe some upper 70s or lower 70s in northwestern Illinois. Chicago metro is probably going to be in the lower 90s. Quincy's going to be near 90, and St. Louis is also going to be in the 90s. Maybe up closer to 100. Heat indexes are probably going to be a little bit higher though. Yeah, heat indexes are going to be over 100 degrees in the western part of the state. Due to the high moisture content. Looks like anywhere really north of Interstate 88 and your heat indexes are a lot lower, like to the north of I-88 because of the frontal boundary positioning. But anywhere south of that, we have heat indexes in the lower 90s to lower hundreds. Any other questions while they're out? Those were good questions that I could answer pretty easily. See here. I think SBC probably just issued their outlook. Oh no, they already did issue their onesie outlook. Yeah, that's their onesie outlook. Storm mode. I'm assuming you're talking about Friday. Storm mode's gonna be uncertain. You're not gonna like that answer, but that is how it is. I'm gonna guess by the point that by when the storms reach Illinois, the northeast Illinois at least, they'll probably be in a line by then. But cannot say that for certain about 3 days out with the pattern that we're looking at. But I would guess they're probably going to be a linear mode over there, but can't really say that for certain. I'm going to get back though to looking in the middle of the week, and if you guys have questions, I'll pop over and answer those. But you can see the Euro for Tuesday is a little bit different looking than the GFS for Tuesday. 500 millibar looks a decent bit different. The GFS has a little bit of a stronger high pressure ridge over kind of the Arklatex region, and the Euro has more of the high pressure region being centered off the South Carolina coast, which actually brings the jet stream, part of the jet stream, a little bit lower into the United States, like over into the lower Missouri Valley, into the middle Mississippi Valley. And then you have the main parent jet, subtropical, not subtropical, but the main parent jets over the northern plains. So you'd have a couple zones of severe weather on Tuesday if this solution were to be correct. One over the northern plains, and then probably one over the mid-Mississippi Valley. And then we have a question here. Does this look like a line with prefrontals possible? Cannot say that for Friday. I'm guessing again you're asking about for Friday. Cannot say that for certain at all. Given the range and also because of the complex factors. Yeah, just cannot say. Looks like Wednesday on the Euro though. Again, deep moisture over really a lot of the United States, with starting to see that kind of pattern break down a little bit as we start to see the high pressure move a little bit to the east, ushering in some thunderstorm chances over the northern to central plains, and then another region over the lower Great Lakes and Midwest area. And you can see that's kind of going to be a rinse and repeat for several days as this pattern kind of continues. So we'll look at rain totals between the GEFS and the Euro over the next like 10 days or so. Show workout. What is that? You can see over the next 10 days or so, looking at rain totals here. Figured I would do this at the end of the stream, or not the end yet, but getting toward the end of the stream. We can see that rain totals are going to pile up over the eastern coast and also into the Midwest. Like Iowa could see 2 to 3 inches of rain in some spots, at least. The mean on models is 2 to 3 inches of rain over Iowa over the next few days. Also another secondary hotspot kind of over the Ozark Mountain region in like Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri. And we can kind of see there's some differences between the GFS and Euro. Like the GFS has more rainfall over the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains. And then the GFS also has more rain into kind of the Rockies as well. But yeah, we can see the pattern is definitely going to be very rainy if you're over from portions of the northern plains back kind of really throughout a large area. And then the pattern where you would see stronger storms is probably going to be generally co-located in here, another large area. Very active pattern though coming up, at least storm chance wise, for a large area. And it's probably going to continue that way for a while with this look in the long range as well, with more thunderstorm systems just riding along the edge of the high pressure zones. I got 11 people in here, so thanks for everybody for tuning in. Any questions? Let me know. You can see we have the rest of the models are now loading in. We have the NAM out to 30 hours. We have a couple models out to 30 hours actually, because the FV3 is also out to 30 hours. So we can check what we got for tomorrow on the FV3. Looks like we get thunderstorms to develop over the central plains in the early evening hours, and they kind of move southeastward. Looks like instability values are pretty high over the region, which is what we were kind of expecting. Looks like the NAM is also out to this range as well now. Close the global models for now because I don't think we're going to need them. Okay, so it looks like the newest NAM is out for tomorrow. We can do the forecast loop as requested. We can see thunderstorms kind of develop over Nebraska and Kansas toward 4 p.m. and then over in western Nebraska and kind of the Dakotas, they develop mountain time. They would develop around 2, central 3, and move southeastward with time, moving into more central parts of the states by 9 or 10. For areas in Kansas, we get storms developing around 3 and moving southward by 9 o'clock into Oklahoma. or 10 o'clock into Oklahoma. Let's dive into kind of the thunderstorm environment. We'll start in Kansas here, take a little bit of an average sounding in front of those storms that are developing. So we can see that there is a large temperature dew point depression leading toward dry air and thunderstorm downdraft potential. Lots of acceleration with the profile as well, given the very steep low lapse rates. Lots of storm feel and moderately strong wind shear values as well, which will help lead into a damaging wind risk and probably large hail initially. Further to the north with those developing storms in North Dakota, South Dakota. It's like more of the same, very dry profiles leading to more of a damaging wind and hail risk. Once some of these storms, especially in Nebraska, there's some sort of boundary there. So you might have a tornado threat in maybe western central Nebraska tomorrow. Looks like there's some sort of boundary that gets pushed westward with deeper moisture attached to it and southeasterly surface winds. Southeasterly surface winds cause usually more curve in the low level photographs and also cause more change in the low level wind direction, which increases the tornado risk normally. So we'll kind of have to watch that. But very strong moisture, but a lot of dry air in the lower to middle levels again. So probably more of a wind and hail threat there, but maybe some tornado risk as well. We'll have to watch that. Analyzing the pattern synoptically, we can see we have that wave, we have that little storm energy kick over the mid-Atlantic again, and then we have several systems. Number 1 over Kansas, number 2 over Nebraska and South Dakota, and then number 3 over North Dakota, South Dakota. And then we have our player for Thursday's severe weather over Nevada right here, which will move into the same region for Thursday as Wednesday's storms. Delayed the trough a lot. Let's see. Not really much of a difference here at all, at least in in Nevada stuff. Yeah, not really much of a difference. Ooh, a little MCV. Definitely gonna watch portions of like northern central Iowa for Thursday along this boundary with the moisture moving northward and probably some sort of remnant low pressure system that moves in and kind of kicks up more flow for that area. Because given the boundary being there, you're gonna have a few areas of forcing now because of that. See here. We do have some of the ARW and NSSL models loading out now. They're out to 14 hours, and then we have the NAM out to 36 now. See any other model to look at? I guess we could look at the UK Met for more longer range stuff, especially for the MCV. So, seems like it has maybe a couple different pockets of enhanced flow for Friday. One that's over southwest Iowa, and then another one that's over like northeast Iowa and southwest Wisconsin. And then for Saturday, looks more like the GFS, where you have that continued severe threat with the wave over Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois. Which model? I mean, I'm going to say for Friday, I think the Euro is probably the model that I'm least looking at right now. It's been pretty consistent with the Western and more less dynamic solution, which I'm not really buying that much. At first, it didn't even have much of, bless me, much of an event at all. The Euro typically also, I don't think, resolves these mesoscale convective vortexes as well either. Um, it might have the placement more right, but I'm not sure it has the actual strength of the systems correct. NAM is trending west. Let's look at the trend loop of the NAM for Friday at 18Z. We'll look at the trend loop. And we'll look at dew point. Actually, yeah, we'll look at dew point. We'll see what the trend loop is. Okay, so this was the 6Z run. 12Z. Yeah, it's definitely trending west a little bit. We'll see if that trend continues with the 0Z run. The 18Z run was really the run that really jumped west a lot. It jumped the low level cyclone from like central Iowa all the way back into Nebraska. Bless you, allergies going. Yeah, I mean allergies get me this time of the year too. I go in for allergy shots every month, and I'm probably gonna have to go in for my allergy shot here pretty soon for July. But yeah, I'm not sure if it's gonna be that far west. That was a very big jump from the previous two runs. I don't think the NAM's an outlier itself. Maybe that run was, but in general had the right idea before then, it seems. Long range NAM typically likes to jump around too, which is common with longer range models. NAM's out to 13Z on Thursday. See what okay, so we have the NAM is out until to 18Z on Thursday now. So we can kind of see how these systems are looking. So we have one low pressure system that's kind of over Iowa and Minnesota, and then we have that main trough that's kind of over Utah, Colorado, with impinging over into the high plains there. And then we have some sort of support over Texas as well. Dew points at 18Z, we have that boundary setting up over Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota there. And then we have mostly dew points in the 60s out in Nebraska and portions of the Dakotas, with 70s moving northward at probably a decent pace. If we look at 50 millibars, we can kind of see the pace at what the low level moisture would be running at. And yeah, so it's going to be coming out of this direction at like 20, 30 knots. So it's moving northward at a decent pace. No real convective impacts. We can take a little bit of a sounding there for that Iowa stuff. Yeah, not really much of a shear profile. Yeah, not really much one there either. Height falls, we have a lot of height falls actually. So that means we have a pretty strong system if you have height consistently falling in the atmosphere there. See anybody else with more questions as we wait for models to load in? Oh, we got the NAM out to 21. Yes. Well, it doesn't look like the NAM's doing much there. Looks like we have that low pressure system. There's one kind of in Colorado here, which is getting moisture to funnel around it. So you'd probably get storms to develop pretty soon here in Nebraska once we get that inversion to mix out, which if we look at surface-based SIN, it's starting to mix out. Wonder about hurricane development. Yeah, hurricane development definitely isn't my forte. We can go over to the NHC website and look at that real quick. So there's no tropical activity expected over the next 7 days in the Atlantic or the Eastern Pacific or Central Pacific. So they're not expecting anything over the next week. You can see Cape values are starting to build over the plains here with that moisture moving northward and the trough moving in as well. as this run kind of starts to evolve. Now, something that you need to watch during the summertime is your temperatures at 700 millibar. As you can see here, they're rather warm. 16 degrees Celsius, that's cutting it. Usually you want like below 13 or 14 degrees for there to be robust thunderstorm development that's at least surface based. So that's cutting it. For the Midwest day on Friday, we can see that those 700 millibar temperatures are not going to be a problem there, between 10 and 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. So the mid lower levels of the atmosphere are rather cool, which will allow for thunderstorms to grow. Um, I think I've kind of talked about everything I've wanted to, so we're probably gonna wrap it up here now. If anybody has any last second questions that I can answer, let me know. But it's been nice being on here talking to you guys and answering questions and diving into the weather info. So I'll wait a couple minutes here for people with questions, and then um we'll end it off for the night. Um, Going forward, we'll probably do another video or another live stream over the next couple of days. And then I might stream my chase Friday if I chase. So that'll be something to look after. But thank you guys all for coming in here. Yeah, no problem, BHO. June 20th. I did read what you said. I just didn't really have an answer to it. Bye, Peter. Also, if you guys are in here, I have a Discord server, so if you want to join that, I'm decently active on there. Should be linked in the description. If it's not, I can put it in the actual stream chat here. I'll put the link. I don't know if it's actually in the description of the stream. Probably not, because I went through Streamlabs to distribute this. So if you want to join it, I'll put the link in here. Some of these people who are in here are already in there. I did check out if the GFS GFS and HRRR do typically have pretty similar solutions, at least in the long range, because both of them are models that are typically a little bit faster with systems than reality. So typically they have stuff placed further to the east. Yeah, decent comment there.